I'm Shanae Ogwumike.
I'm Lisa Leslie, and we're very excited to tell you about our new podcast with Blue Wire, Front and Center.
Lisa and I are breaking down what's going on in our lives, in the world, and keeping it 100.
We're also learning from amazing guests as well, like Emmanuel Acho.
People that show love to me, I forever got their back.
Vivica A. Fox.
If the foundation isn't right, then the rest of it's going to go wrong from there.
And more.
Subscribe to Front and Center today.
What is Crack-a-Lack-in, Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favale, coming at you once again without my fabulous co-host Adam Frommel. We do still have a loaded episode for you today. I've teed up Bleacher Report's Grant Hughes to come on and discuss all the latest rumors. We do have to bear in mind that we approach these news breaks with caution because there are strategic leaks. There are agendas here. Not all of these rumors are actually legitimate. Most of them are not going to pan out, but they're still fun to bounce around and talk about the theoretical. We touch on Victor Oladipo, Jrue Holiday, Aaron Gordon, some other trade candidates. We have hypothetical trades galore in this episode. And yes, that includes Russell Westbrook and the Houston Rockets. Grant and I also discussed them a bunch. Follow him on Twitter, by the way, at GT_Hughes. However, we have, in the latter half of this episode, Salman Ali coming on the podcast. He's a fellow Blue Wire podcaster, hosts the Red Nation Hoops podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Salman Ali NBA. That's at SalmanAli NBA. He also covers the Rockets for ESPN 97.5. He's going to give us some insight into what's going on in Houston with Russell Westbrook, James Harden, the future of the Rockets right now. We talk about it all. It's a fun conversation. We'll have timestamps attached to the beginning of this episode so you can bounce around if you don't want to listen to everything, although I highly recommend it. Before we dive in, though, I just want to remind, beg, plead, implore every single one of you to subscribe and download to this podcast. Subscriptions really help us, and downloading every episode. Juice those numbers, guys. Come on, really help us out. If you've enjoyed the 4 to 6 hours of content we're pumping out a week at this point, that would be great. Also, whether or not you're using iTunes, please, pretty please, head over there, search Hardwood Knocks. Throw us a 5-star rating, write a review. Criticism is fine as well, as long as you throw a 5-star rating. We are keeping track and reading it all. And also follow us on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks, and you can find us on YouTube. Search YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Hardwood Knocks. We will show up, and subscribe. Last but certainly not least, major shouts to our sponsors, without whom this podcast would not be possible. BetOnline.ag and Indeed. That is a mouthful that I just blew through, but again, please subscribe to this podcast, download every episode. That's the best way to help us out. We love every single one of our listeners. But now it's time to talk some hoops. First, with Bleacher Report's Grant Hughes, followed by Salman Ali from ESPN 97.5. Welcome back, Hardwood Knocks listeners. Coming at you this time with Grant Hughes of Bleacher Report, a longtime coworker and friend of mine, also a very special friend of the pod. He's around these parts all the time. Follow him on Twitter at GT_Hughes. Lots of NBA rumors and stuff to get to. I was just telling Grant, I love this time of year because we've been in the business, around the business long enough to know that most of the chatter is just absolute shit or these strategic leaks, but I still really enjoy it, like going through the different scenarios. And before I ask whether you agree, and before we get to some of these rumors, Grant, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great, and this is called a segue, because I'm going to answer your unasked question right now and saying I like it too, and I feel the same way that after a while, at this time of year, even though we're at a different time of year than this would normally happen, this sort of portion of the season, sort of things start to seem familiar. Like, oh, this rumor or leak is sort of like the one 4 years ago that was this. There's only so many things that can be leaked, and actually, the fun part for me a lot of times is trying to decide, like, well, okay, so who leaked this? Is it the agent, or is it the organization, or someone else close to the player? And what's the point? Because you can sort of take it as, yeah, even if it is a bullshit rumor, which the vast majority right now I think are, you can always sort of then use that to try to figure out, like, what's everybody's motivation and what's actually going to happen based on what you determine answering that question. So even if you get a little jaded, as I think I certainly am at this point, you can still find something interesting about it.
Yeah, look, I'm the type of person that's going to make a joke or throw off-the-cuff analysis on the timeline first and then think it through second about what you just said, where it's like, oh, where is this coming from? What's the angle? What's the purpose? It's also, I don't want to say I feel dirty, but I enjoy it so much this time of year. And then yet, like, one of the problems with the league is that they probably focus too much on transactions, or I would say ascribe too much value to the theoretical, because that's what they spend time discussing, where it's, oh, the Bucks are playing anyone on national TV, and it's fucking January. Is Giannis going to leave a year and a half from now? So I get the frustration there, but I feel like it's okay to indulge it this time of year.
Well, especially because, and we were talking about this before too, this offseason is so condensed now that, as these rumors come fast and furious, it's going to be like a week, or, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much, before we figure out if they're true or not. And then we could just cross them off or say, wow, I can't believe that, that Victor Oladipo's on the Knicks now, like, or, whatever. Like, we're going to get resolutions a lot more quickly because this offseason is going to go in a blink. So that's a positive too.
Even though sports had a break, your business didn't. You have to keep moving, and that makes hiring more important than ever. Indeed is here to help. Indeed.com is the #1 job site in the world because Indeed gets you the best people fast. Unlike other sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility over your hiring. You only pay for what you need, you can pause your account at any time, and there are no long-term contracts. Plus, Indeed provides powerful tools to make your search that much easier, like sponsored jobs, which are shown to be 3.5 times more likely to result in a hire. With 73% of online job seekers visiting Indeed each month, Indeed is going to get you the important hire you need, just like they have for over 3 million businesses. Right now, Indeed is offering our listeners a free $75 credit to boost your job post, which means more quality candidates will see it fast. Try Indeed out with a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. This is their best offer available anywhere. Go right now to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Offer valid through December 31st. Look, let's not start with Oladipo. Let's start in Houston, because that place is going up in flames. I don't necessarily want to belabor it because we just talked to Salman Ali about it. However, I am curious your thoughts and just a brief recap of everything that's happened basically it's definitely been building towards this, but in the past 36 hours, essentially, we have heard that Russell Westbrook and James Harden per ESPN are concerned about the direction of the franchise. While that story portrayed that no trade request was imminent, and even Tim McMahon on the Hoop Collective Thursday said that no trade request had been formal from Westbrook, Shams Charania and Kelly Iko of The Athletic have basically reported that Russ wants out of Houston. He prefers to assume the role that he had in OKC as a floor general. And that, to me, I take that as a trade request. And so now people are just wondering what happens to the Rockets, because if you move Russ, it's almost certainly going to be for a negative return because his contract is just so cumbersome. And I don't, if I were Houston, I would not be giving up a first round pick as part of that deal. Because that's just a clear, and first of all, they can only trade their 2022 first round pick. Because they've already traded a zillion, but you don't want to be in a position where you're moving him and have to attach a sweetener, even though at 3 years and $132.6 million, you might have to, or the reality is I honestly don't know what you could get as a return. And the final thing I'll say is Russell Westbrook is still really good. He is, I would say, a borderline NBA player to me still, and people will argue he's a no-brainer. It's just that his fit is so complicated in so many places that unless you're basically structuring your team around him, or he's in a situation like Houston where you just have 4 out around him at all times, and there is one other co-star there, so he's not doing it alone, I don't necessarily see the point in gambling on him. And if it didn't work out with Harden, who he actively wanted to play with last summer, and vice versa, I just don't know what you do in Houston. I just don't know where you go from here. So I just went on an incoherent rant. What is your just thoughts on this entire cluster, at this point?
So, I have a lot. The first thing is, I think that I don't want to make it a personal thing about Russell Westbrook specifically. So I'll just say that a player like him, insofar as there are any, is really kind of the worst kind of player you can have on a roster. And so, and that doesn't need to mean that your belief that he's a borderline all NBA player is wrong, because I think that I buy that. But what I mean is, if you have Russell Westbrook on your team, we just learned for sure that he will not be satisfied unless he is the alpha and omega, unless he is basically, the MVP version that was on the Thunder post Kevin Durant. That's who he wants to be for an NBA team. And we just learned that he's really not capable of being different than that and being happy. So that and if you have that version of Russell Westbrook, the post KD Russ on your team, congratulations, you have like a 6 seed ceiling and like a 47 win season. Like that's as good as you're going to be, I think, because he just determines. He's like a pickup player that he determines if your team wins or loses because he's going to shoot you into it or out of it. And there's just only a certain number of ways you can play with him on the roster. He's basically a center, right? Because you can't play with a conventional center with him and succeed because of the spacing.
Right.
So he has all these strategic and tactical limitations he imposes on you. And then there's on top of that, the salary. And then on top of that, there's his belief or his desire to be the guy. So I think that makes him one of the least palatable players to have on your roster in the entire NBA. And that is different than saying he sucks. He does not suck. It's just a huge challenge to make him work. And I don't know if it's possible. So this is not a solutions-based discussion. I'm just pointing out problems because I don't have solutions. Like all I'm doing is like emphasizing what's very obvious or I think is obvious. But yeah, man, like if you're the Hornets, if you're the Knicks, those are the types of teams that Westbrook actually, if you squint, makes sense because he'll make you mediocre or sort of around that and interesting. And if you haven't been that for a while, then I think that's something to aspire to for certain franchises. But yeah, man, like that's a ton of money. That's a tough player to fit. Like I just, and look, honestly, is this surprising? I mean, I'm not surprised at all that this Houston thing went bad. I think it was foreseeable, when they brought him in the first place.
That was one of the trades that you knew was terrible in real time.
100%. And they gave up assets with Chris Paul to do it. Like I remember at the time the discussion was, my opinion, I'm sure I've said this more than once, was that like I'm actually not sure that I actually think Chris Paul is better for the Rockets than Westbrook would be. Just take the picks out of it. So that made no sense from the jump. And then the fit issues were always obvious and I mean it's crazy when we're not smarter than Daryl Morey. I don't think, again, what this also says to me is that Daryl Morey probably didn't want to do this in the first place.
Right. Like you don't want to displace the blame onto James Harden or I'll throw all the blame on Tillman Fertitta all day long, but he is like culpable in this, but at the same time, like that was not a Daryl Morey trade. It was just so clear that was, and also I don't know, like, how do you get to the point where you're giving up that many assets? Was it because the Thunder knew that Harden was desperate to play with Westbrook or that he was not going to play with Paul anymore? It's like, even if Daryl Morey's forced to make that trade, like what forces him to have to give up so much value where it was 2 firsts and 2 swaps, right? Plus Chris Paul.
Yeah.
I would just be curious to see like what was the leverage for OKC in that situation.
I don't know. It seemed like one of those deals where it's sort of like the Paul George one where although maybe not, because the Clippers were kind of like, well, we're willing to do this because we're giving up all this stuff for Paul George and really Kawhi Leonard because Kawhi's not coming unless we get Paul George.
That was how Tim McMahon put it, is that the Thunder found a way to trade Kawhi Leonard without ever having him on their roster.
Right, yeah, that's really, and so maybe it was like, well, Chris Paul, we got to trade him because him and James Harden don't get along, and everybody knows it, and so the Thunder are gonna. I mean, I don't know. You know what's funny to me though is as you're thinking of like what's a good Russ destination or even a James Harden destination if it comes to that, like what should Houston be looking for? It's probably the Thunder with like Steven Adams' expiring deal and a bunch of picks. It's just like they should just run it back. I think just let's do it over and re-swap assets.
And that would be my next question. And so do you see like any reasonable destinations for Russ? The ones we've heard mentioned so far, I believe, I don't know if the Pistons were concretely linked, but they were mentioned. The Hornets and Knicks have definitely been linked. Is that it? Like, am I missing? Like, I don't know what other teams have been. I know the Clippers have been mentioned tangentially. I don't know if it's been officially. It just doesn't feel like there's been a ton of interest in him. And I don't know why there would be when you have Chris Paul floating around out there, a superior player on a shorter deal. So, and then even Brian Windhorst had said he reported that he surveyed the league and there's not a ton of interest in Russell Westbrook. And so it opens up the other conversation of like, there needs to be something done about these supermaxes where they just don't count as much against the cap or something, like the players still get their money because they come they've seemed like they've become backbreaking from a team building perspective. And I think billionaires should spend, that they should go into the luxury tax when they absolutely have to. At the same time, like there's a clear hurdle there. Like it's not MLB where you could just be like, well, we're going to spend whatever we want, no matter how much we already spent. There's actually limits in place. Like it makes it harder for you to spend at a point. So that's definitely a conversation to have. But we're talking about a very unique dilemma because it's a player who, if you trade for him, I think whether you're in the West or the East, you automatically become at least a possible playoff team. And yet there's just no interest in him. And it might come back to how hard it is to find a co-star fit with him. And then also, as you already mentioned, it doesn't seem like he's willing to be the number 2. And so it almost feels like he has to be where the player's like just a little bit worse than him. Maybe the Paul George was probably his optimal teammate. I probably would have ranked Paul George ahead of him when you're going through the pecking order of star power in the NBA. But because Paul George doesn't necessarily want to dominate the ball on offense, like that's the fit. I could even let's say a Jason Tatum, who's very clearly the better player at this point, but Russell Westbrook could probably play with him because Tatum doesn't necessarily need to have the ball as much as a James Harden or even a Luka Doncic or just someone, or Kevin Durant, who Russell Westbrook actually played with.
Yeah, no, as I'm looking through, I mean, the Knicks, again, for all the wrong reasons, the Knicks and Hornets make sense. The Clippers are a joke to me. Like, that's just, like, there's no chance that makes sense.
For the sake of content, I would support it.
Yeah, for the hashtag content, it'd be worth it. The other teams you have to rule out, though, so I'm just looking through, it's like, okay, what about the Kings? It's like, well, no, because they value De'Aaron Fox, and if you put Russell Westbrook on, throw all the other obvious fit issues out, like, you can't put Westbrook on a team that has a young player that the franchise believes is going to be, its leader, because suddenly that guy is second fiddle, like way second fiddle, if you get like full on Russ on an I'm back tour, type of thing. So you got to rule those teams out too. I mean, like Orlando, like I don't know what you put together to do that, but Orlando is in that bucket of we've been uninteresting and not very good, and we'd at least like to be interesting and maybe a little better. Something like that. You have to look around like the 7 to 11 or 12 seed range in each conference, I think, as a starting point, because you can't put them on a terrible team, can't put them on a really good team with great players. So you got that middle area to kind of play around with, I think, and that's about it. Yeah,
and I don't think it helps that there are other better suited guards on the market. We're not even talking about just Chris Paul, but like Jrue Holiday is available. Right. So you're competing with those two who are Jrue Holiday is going to be a free agent after next year if he declines his player option. Russ is probably the better player in a vacuum, but you're going to like Holiday's contract more. And then Chris Paul, again, like we said, is actually the superior player. So I don't know how you get around that. I'm wondering if there's just going to be a team that comes out of the woodwork randomly here, where it's not I think everyone's looking towards the Charlotte and New Yorks because they assume that those are the teams that will be comfortable, like really accelerating the rebuild to the point of let's chase that 7-8 seed in the Eastern Conference. I'm just curious, like, if a team will come out of nowhere and do something. But the problem is that I don't know what team that's going to be. I've thought about the Lakers a little bit, just because could they be a little star hungry and want that second playmaker with LeBron getting older? And this is a star that they could actually acquire with, I'll say, the poo-poo platter of salary that they have to offer. But like in that deal, first of all, the deal effectively has to be Danny Green. You need Avery Bradley to opt in, which it doesn't sound like he's going to, so that could be a moot point there. But let's say he does. You need JaVale McGee to opt in as well. You have those 3 salaries. Then you could also throw Quinn Cook in there if you guarantee his salary. That's 4. You're going to have to trade Kyle Kuzma. That's 5. And then I would think you have to trade number 28 as an actual salary because that's your next most like expensive salary filler since you're not going to move Davis or LeBron James. And so at that point, it's like, okay, we just gave up expiring contracts of, I'll say 3 to 4 players when you look at Kuzma, Bradley, Green, and number 28 that could actually help you next season. You kind of need something else back other than Russell Westbrook in return, I would think. And that gets into the conversation of, if you're Houston, are you giving away your 2022 pick to do that? What's the protection need to be? Are you willing? The thing I proposed was that exact deal from Los Angeles for Westbrook and then a 2022 pick swap, which for Houston, I think you try and avoid that at all costs, because the next question I'm bound to ask you is James Harden long for Houston at this point? If you end up moving him, in the middle of this year, even after this year, like you could be bad ahead of that 2022 draft, and all of a sudden you're giving the Lakers like this primo asset, and you're bereft of picks to begin with, unless you've gotten a killer ransom as part of a James Harden trade. So they're just in this dilemma where even if there's a team that comes out of the woodwork, it's the type of team where I'm wondering, like, who has just the expendable contracts to give up, even if you're willing to take on Westbrook's money? And there are so very few of those among the really good teams in the NBA.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see it. And like, it will have to be a team that comes out of the woodwork if it's not one of those obvious ones we mentioned, the Knicks or the Hornets. So yeah, I don't know. Do you think Harden is, how much longer is James Harden on the Rockets?
I will say that I will be mildly surprised if he's still in Houston at starting 21-22. I could see him finishing this year, but if they trade Westbrook or this thing just implodes, which it's already teetering on implosion. You have PJ Tucker entering free agency next year. He's mad about his contract. Everyone's mad in Houston, first of all. Bruno Caboclo might be mad about his contract, which, like, I don't know. So I would, at this point, I just feel like the writing's on the wall. And, James Harden, if he really pushed for the Rockets to give up assets for Russell Westbrook, he definitely deserves to shoulder some of the blame here. But I don't know why you would want to stay in Houston at this point. When you look at what's sort of happened, they've just overturned everything that made them special. And again, how much is Harden at fault? Because they structured that entire franchise around him, but you got away from that with, maybe it's still built around the James Harden ethos, where, Russ is talking about the lack of accountability there, and James Harden seems more of like a laid back, lead by example type player. Is that, like, that's on Harden to some extent then too? So, like, they're here in part because of Harden, but when you just look at this, the trajectory of this team, like, what is there to, like, the moves? There are no moves unless there's a team that's really going to overvalue Westbrook. And no, I don't think he's immovable, because we've proven time and again that these contracts are just going to get turned over a zillion different times, no matter how expensive they are. But what is the move here with Eric Gordon guaranteed 3 more years on his deal at $54.7 million? The 4th year is completely not guaranteed. Yeah, you have Robert Covington with 2 years and like $25 million left. But if you're trading Robert Covington, my bet is you're actually getting worse. And it would be ditto for PJ Tucker, who at this point, I'd be shocked if he's back in Houston after next season, unless they're going to give him an extension before the year. So, like, what is the move here? And if you're Harden, you're seeing these other teams on the come up in the West. Like, Dallas is there. Golden State's going to be healthier this year. The Lakers, I would assume, aren't going anywhere for a while. Ditto for the Clippers. The Jazz always sort of hang around. Like, what if Phoenix trades for Chris Paul and you have to watch, Chris Paul resurrect basketball in the state of Arizona where you played college ball? I feel like we're going to reach a point where it won't be necessarily Houston's decision, but that James Harden is going to push for out. And I think that point, if it's not already there, if it's not happening behind the scenes already, it will happen before next season.
Yeah, I think so. The thing to me that would keep Harden in Houston through, I don't know about the end of this contract, but, which ends in 2023, but at least through next year, or this year, I guess we can call it now. Is that I don't know if he's ever going to find a situation where he is more powerful, because, like the way that the Rockets did everything, like from who's on the team to how they played to, all these, these stylistic advances, the centerless stuff, like Russell Westbrook had a part to play in that. But, Harden really seems to be like the single most influential figure in that organization. And I think that's true to some extent of a lot of big names, but you really don't see it to this degree. And so, like, if he, and I think he came out and said, or, sources close to him or whatever said that he's locked in on this year and, unlike Russ, wants to stay, which is what you should say, I guess, but to keep your trade value high. But I think that he's just got it really good. And if winning, that's the problem though, is how much does really being in total control of an organization matter if you're just not going to be able to win and there's no good way to make your team better? Like, so I agree that at some point, I don't know if I'm ready to say that this is his last season with the team, but I don't think there's any scenario where he finishes his current contract. I think even if it's just the Rockets wising up and realizing our only path forward to not sucking for like the 10 years after Harden leaves is to use him to get some assets back. It may be them that decides it eventually if he's not the one, asking out.
the last thing I'll ask you about this is, what is the team that right now can put together an offer for James Harden that wouldn't make Houston necessarily hang up the phone? Like, let's say things are just tottering on the brink. James Harden, like you said, is locked in, wants to be prepared for this season, doesn't really necessarily want out of Houston, but like, as ESPN reported, it doesn't seem like the situation is great. What's the team that could come in right now and at least get the Rockets to think about it?
I told you it's the Thunder, man.
Right.
Like they've got all their picks. They've got the expiring salary if you want to cut money. They've got, I mean, sure, if you get SGA back or something like that. I mean, it really is the Thunder, which of course is never, ever going to happen. I don't know. Like, I guess it depends on what the Rockets want, because you could just start going down the list of expiring deals and say, let's get DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge or
it'd be really funny if they moved Harden with the intent to like tinker around with Russell Westbrook moving forward. Like, now he's the centerpiece.
I, for one, want to see the Westbrook DeRozan backcourt.
Oh God.
Can you imagine? No, I don't know. That's a great question. Like, I'm trying to talk myself into, like, if you're the Nuggets, would you do Jamal Murray and something, or like do the Gary Harris, Michael Porter Jr. a bunch of picks package with more salary thrown in? Like, I don't want to see what Harden would do to the way Jokic has the team playing. So like, that's out. I don't have a good answer for you. Do you have anything? Like, Harden so determines how you play that it's really difficult to imagine him on a team kind of like Westbrook with another, defining star.
I think the team that stares you in the face, I think the Thunder are one. There's the Philly one, just because if they're willing to give up Embiid or Simmons in that deal, like, it's a whole new ball game. You attach, if Russell Westbrook is still there, like Simmons and picks, like, that's the Simmons Westbrook fit would be, that'd be something. The team I will mention though, New Orleans, like, they have all those Lakers picks, and they have like, I guess stuff, like, you're not giving up Zion Williamson as part of that deal. Or maybe you are. Like, if it was just Zion and like filler, would you do it if you're New Orleans? You might have to consider it, but they have all those Lakers picks, their own picks moving forward. They have Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They have Lonzo Ball. They have Josh Hart. There's like a lot of stuff they could get done. You could look at, is Houston interested in like some sort of sign and trade scenario for Brandon Ingram as well? They have Jackson Hayes. If Houston was really looking to reboot, they have stuff that I think could get it done. And I would not move. I think it would only make sense to actually make such a move if you're keeping Zion and Jrue Holiday as part of it. It would just make so much sense to still have Harden there. You definitely have to keep at least one of Ingram or Holiday in that scenario to me, but they just have a lot of stuff. And so if it gets to that point, and look, the good thing about their quote unquote stuff is, like, if you're moving Jrue Holiday, he has 1 year left on his deal, because they do need salary filler to make this work. Like, Lonzo Ball's sort of expensive relative to people who are on a rookie scale contract, but you do have to get, you're taking back $41.3 million in Harden's salary. So I don't necessarily know what the exact package has to look like. Again, there's the Ingram sign and trade, or you have Holiday if you need to use it. But that would be the other team that stands out to me.
It's going to be tough, man. I got nothing else left on Harden other than to say it's going to be tough, which is also my same analysis of Westbrook. So double tough for the Rockets.
The wait is finally over. Football is back. You might not be at a game this year, but you can still be in on the action at BetOnline. BetOnline is going the extra mile to make sure you can get in on every possible chance to win this season. From game spreads and totals to team, player, and coaching props, BetOnline gives you more options to wager on than anywhere else. You can get in on their season opening bonuses today and start off wagering on wins, division odds, and championship futures all day, every day. Head to BetOnline today and take advantage of all the great sign-up bonuses. Don't forget to use promo code BlueWire, all one word, at betonline.ag. That's BlueWire, all one word. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Triple tough for the Pacers with Victor Oladipo. I'm actually like laughing at the reports that are coming out. So there was the one on Thursday that said he asked players from the Heat, Raptors, and Knicks of all teams in front of his own teammates if he could come play with them, which is just shout out to the Knicks, because this just proves that Frank Ntilikina is a superstar draw. The players, they want to come and be his teammates. So shout out to the Knicks and Frank Ntilikina. There was also Victor Oladipo's sister, I believe, on Twitter, like, quote tweeted the report and said something about which teammate is really opening his mouth, and then someone responded with, "This is definitely Miles Turner," and she agreed with them, and then Miles Turner slipped in with a response saying, "Oh, it's like that." Things are clearly not okay in Pacer world, and so what happens here? I think the assumption was that the Pacers were just gonna let it ride. They have Nate Bjorken as their head coach now, and you just see where you lie at the trade deadline. Oladipo's value is probably so low just because he hasn't really ever fully regained form following that 2018 quad injury. You're not going to lose much, if anything. You're only going to maybe build up his value if you let him play till the trade deadline, or maybe the fit just works out and you want to keep him. But now I'm like, something needs to change here.
Well, so the thing is, I think what you said about, they now maybe isn't the time and the deadline might be better. I think we could apply that to almost every trade we discuss preseason, because generally just this idea that you have to make your team before the season starts is crazy to me, because you don't really know. I mean, I don't think this is a hot take at all. I'm sure people have said this, but waiting to the deadline just isn't as fun to talk about. So we got to do this now. But yeah, no, to me, I kind of thought Oladipo was going to be traded before the season started before this, because it just felt like, I don't know, maybe I got swayed by all the buzz and all the reports and just constant, the industry that we're in. It made it seem like it was more likely than it actually was. But where's your sense of taste, Vic? I get. I get the sure, the Raptors. Who are the other team? The Heat. Yeah, everybody wants to play for those teams. I get it. But the Knicks is just man, what does this guy want? It doesn't make any sense. It's a which one of these doesn't belong situation. The other thing that's interesting to me is that I always think about how Oladipo did not sign with the Pacers, right? And Jimmy Butler didn't sign, he got traded to the Timberwolves and then the Sixers. And, Russ got this different set of circumstances, but he got traded to the Rockets. He didn't sign there. Kyrie got traded to the Celtics. I kind of think maybe we need to start being a little more on the lookout for guys that get traded to teams that they didn't have control over, because it seems like a pattern is developing where those are always the guys that at some point just decide nah, this is it.
Kyrie in Boston. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I'm spotting trends, and Vic seems to be the latest in that.
I don't know what you get for him on the market at this point, though. I still think maybe waiting might be the best play, because I think you boost his value. And his salary for next season is palatable, but you're dealing with the performance post-injury. And at this point, look, the sample size of his being an All-NBA player versus his being very much not an All-NBA player, it tilts so far towards the latter that I don't know what his value ends up being. That might be a player if Lakers fans need to we need a third star or something. Maybe you could get in on that by including Kuzma, Caruso, and a 2022 pick swap. Maybe that's something that entices Indiana along with salary filler. And look, they're going to look to remain competitive, so maybe having a Danny Green in that deal is something that intrigues them too. There was a rumor, though, this is per Kevin O'Connor, that the Celtics are interested, among the teams interested in Victor Oladipo. So I'm just curious about how you feel about that fit, or if there's any team that, and I think there are probably a few that I think you could justify making the move for Oladipo, but if there's one that stands out or where you'd at least be super tantalized by his fit there.
Well, I mean, the Lakers are definitely one, and part of that is just because of we're a year-to-year team anyway. So if we lose him for nothing, or if this flops, we really only gave up Kuzma, who we don't want to pay what we're going to have to pay on his next deal, and Green or whatever. So that makes sense. I mean, I think the Clippers, actually, if they're trying to really flip things around and get, a point guard that can play both ends. He's not a real point guard, but I would have no problem playing him there because he can guard ones. He's going to give you sort of a more defense than Lou Williams, which is not hard, and more offense than Patrick Beverley, again, assuming he's healthy. And he's a big name, and, something like that. I actually think sort of almost anywhere you imagine, well, where does Victor Oladipo make sense? Jrue Holiday makes more. So that's another hurdle for the Pacers, is that, you've got a guy who, they're both rentals. Holiday makes a little more money, but I think if you pulled every team in the NBA, they'd just rather have Jrue Holiday and pay the $7 million more or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So that's a big problem, is that it's kind of like the Russ thing with there's Chris Paul and there's other better options. The Pacers are just in, nothing close to a position of strength trend. And that was true before he's broadcast. It's being broadcast that he's trying to get off his own team.
Right. That's a great point. I'm intrigued by the fit with Boston, and the thing I thought about is, so like, let's say you're Phoenix and the Chris Paul trade is going to happen. You have the number 10 pick, which you're not going to, my assumption is that they're not giving up number 10 unless they're getting a pick back or something. They're not giving up number 10, Bridges, Ayton, obviously, or Booker. So you have number 10 and you know Chris Paul is coming. You also know that, like, because of the number of players you're going to trade out, like the body count there is going to be like a little bit lower. Either you're going to use your cap space, and in which case that'll cost you Aaron Baines and Dario Saric and Frank Kaminsky, or you're going to keep those guys and you just won't have a ton of wiggle room other than maybe the room exception or the non-taxpayers mid-level. However, you're going to structure your books. So let's say, again, you're at number 10 and anything's happening in this draft, and let's say you like Sadiq Bey or Patrick Williams, and Patrick Williams is that's the guy I've like zoomed in on every year. There's one or two of them, and he's it for me. And he's been shooting up draft boards. I've seen him mocked now as high as 7. I've also seen him mocked as low as 16. Let's just say a Patrick Williams or, again, a Sadiq Bey, who definitely would fit there, is going to be available at 14. And the Celtics offer you 14, and I think they have 26 and 30. Are those the picks that they have?
That's right.
For number 10. And so you can move back to 14, get 2 extra players in the first round, and you're still getting the player at 14. One of the players, I'm sure you'd want Devin Vassell instead, but I feel like he's going to go before 10, which is why maybe you consider this. So you get one of those players still, you have those picks, and then Boston turns around, goes to Indy, and they have number 10, Gordon Hayward, and let's say they're offering like a future pick of their own, or you have Romeo Langford, you have Grant Williams. It's Gordon Hayward, number 10, and stuff for Miles Turner and Victor Oladipo. Are you considering that if you're Indiana?
Oh, if I'm Boston, I'm considering the hell out of that. But if I'm Indiana, I don't know. I guess. So I actually had kind of gamed this out as a Jrue Holiday situation, which the logic still applies. Where it's you're Boston, you flip those 3 firsts into something higher in the top 10 range. I'm not sure what team's willing to do that necessarily, but say you do that, and then you're looking at using Hayward in the pick to get, I was thinking Holiday or something like that. If I'm Boston, why don't I just keep Hayward and pick the guy at number 10 or whatever it ends up being? Because, like the Celtics are in a situation where even if they, their roster is almost full as it is, they've got these 3 firsts, they just basically can't use them all. And they've got major tax problems going forward. And so what Boston needs is another guy on a rookie scale deal who is actually good and might play for them. So, I mean, like if the Celtics could get Patrick Williams and keep Gordon Hayward at his money, I mean, I don't know. I like Miles Turner a lot and I like Oladipo, but that's something I'm thinking I might not do just because I think for the Celtics, that's just your risk is a lot lower and maybe your path to, keeping Tatum and Brown super competitive teams for a very long time depends more on getting another younger guy, which is weird because their core guys are so young. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's a reasonable trade. If I'm Boston again and I can trade up using those 3 picks, I might just want to keep that better pick that I got.
That's a good point too. Not really something I considered. It would definitely get expensive if you were hashing out a deal. And again, it's not just Hayward and 10 for the dual acquisition of Oladipo and Turner, but if you're getting both, I actually might consider it because you could let Victor Oladipo walk after next year, and then you still have Miles Turner. And you do need, I would say, long-term an upgrade at the center position. However, you probably want someone who matches up better with Joel Embiid. So you're right. If you can get a Patrick Williams or a Sadiq Bey at 10, those are the guys that I would like. But why wouldn't you do it then? That is a good point. Although, if you were able to get Jrue Holiday for that package, Gordon Hayward in 10, you would actually need to take back more money from New Orleans because Gordon Hayward has a $34.2 million player option. And then I don't know, I think I would still do it. Just like Jrue Holiday, I feel like doesn't really have to interfere with what Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are doing. Maybe you're like too small in that regard because he's about the same size as Victor Oladipo, and then you still have like Marcus Smart, you have Kemba Walker. It's like there's the downside there, whether you're trading for Oladipo or Jrue Holiday, but it does feel like either of those two guys is someone who can put pressure on the rim and defenses in the half court would elevate their immediate ceiling. So if you don't care about the long-term cost of the roster, that seems like an avenue worth exploring because I think the ceilings on Oladipo and Jrue Holiday, particularly in the playoffs, are definitely higher than Gordon Hayward at this point.
I think I agree with that. I want you brought up Turner, and this is going to be a little bit of a diversion, but I think Turner's a really interesting piece in this offseason because I'm sure at some point we've had, maybe recently, there have been, well, yeah, I think in conjunction with some of the Oladipo stuff, there was talk of like, well, Turner might be someone the Pacers are trying to move. And I have a hard time figuring out if that's actually accurate or if it's that Turner is like the guy who comes up whenever you're trying to find, hey, who'd really fit at center for Team X? Whether it's like the Pelicans or the Celtics or the Warriors or whatever, it's always Miles Turner. It's just always like the guy that can defend the rim and shoot threes. I wonder if the reason he's in discussions or whispers or rumors or whatever it is because he just like obviously would help so many teams, right. Or if it's actually because Indiana wants to move him. Like half the time I wonder why the Pacers aren't trying to move Sabonis instead. But I think that's just because I'm lower on Sabonis than most. But Turner's such Turner's just a weird figure in this offseason where he keeps getting brought up, and I just don't know if there's any fire to that smoke.
I'm curious to see if Indiana's going to do anything because I do feel like there's actually at least a small fire there. And like one of the red flags for me was when Victor Oladipo announced that he was staying out of the bubble but coming back in. Like none of it was done through the team, which I feel like is bizarre. And that to me is probably more troubling than him asking to play for other teams in front of his teammates, although that, of course, is troubling there. I'm just like, this feels like maybe there is a fire, but I just don't know if they're going to try and put it out right now. I could very easily see this team just standing pat leading into next season.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because you're going to have more teams potentially getting desperate. And then maybe, again, like you said, Oladipo's value is not going to get much lower than it is right now. So kind of hanging on and hoping the fire, if there is some, doesn't, burn the building down might be the best bet.
Jrue Holiday, we already talked about, and we mentioned the Celtics' interest in him. That was also per Kevin O'Connor. Mark Stein reported that the Atlanta Hawks are also interested in him. And I think the framework there, and we've actually talked about it on this podcast, is number 6 and like one of your young wings. And then can you get them to take back at least some money so you're not just obliterating a ton of your cap space in the process, like Dwayne Dedmon, number 6, and Kevin Huerter or Cam Reddish for Jrue Holiday. That I like the fit in Atlanta with Trae Young. I'm curious what you think, or is there like, and we've probably, talked about Jrue Holiday trades ad nauseum, but is there like another team? Is it just Denver at this point? Everyone comes back to Denver, which I just feel like they don't have the asset firepower to get him without giving up Michael Porter Jr., which it doesn't feel like they're going to do. How do you feel about the fit with the Hawks, and is there just like a team that you see that has the right mix of assets and motivation to go out and actually get him?
Well, first of all, I was going to say Denver, and I was going to say as long as they don't have to give up Michael Porter Jr., so we can skip past that. But
I apologize for shitting all over your take before you got to it.
No, it's a take that needs to be shit on. So Atlanta makes sense. I think that's a reasonable package, but if you're Holiday and you would assume that David Griffin wants to kind of do right by him, I maybe that's a naive assumption. Are the Hawks going to be better than the Pelicans? So if Holiday wants, to play for a team that's going to be a more certain winner or advance, deeper in the playoffs or make the playoffs, I don't know if Atlanta is that team. Mm-hmm. Maybe certainly Atlanta wants to be that team, which is why they're broadcasting that the 6th pick is available and they got all this cap space they're going to spend. And they're going to be used by every free agent as leverage to get more from his incumbent team because, hey, I might sign with Atlanta. Like they're in a good position to get better. And Holiday would help in that effort. I just don't know that Atlanta with Holiday, I don't know that team's any better than New Orleans with Holiday. So we got to leave. So I don't know. I mean, it makes sense for the Hawks, I guess, but Holiday, I don't know how psyched he'd be on that one. But I mean, Brooklyn, right? If you are willing to give up Karis LeVert and some draft capital, I think the Pelicans should do that. You got to throw in a fair amount more money because LeVert, I think his deal escalates. It's like 16, 18, and 20, I don't know what it is, but it's something in that neighborhood. So you've got to add some money there. But like if the Nets believe Holiday is the better fitting third star than LeVert is, which I think there's some logic to that, given LeVert is better on the ball than off, and Holiday might actually, can give you things on both ends of the floor without having the ball. That makes some sense. And I think Brooklyn, if the question is who's got the assets and the will to do it, as much as Denver is an obvious one, I think Brooklyn is right up there too.
I actually agree with you. Not to sound shocked about that. I think Brooklyn probably has more motivation than Denver at this point, just because it doesn't seem like they want to give up Michael Porter Jr. And I don't see a pathway unless you're going to like start trading like multiple distant firsts. And then again, you run into the issue. I think I've said this to you, where I can see situations where, you know what, if the Lakers were willing to give me a very lightly, if unprotected, 2027 first round pick, I bet on a downswing by that point. But at the same time, the turnover for front office heads, like you're not gonna be the one using that pick. And so why are you making that trade? The team that I don't know if they would have the motivation, but I would be curious if this gets it done. If the Spurs were just like, hey, here's number 11, Lonnie Walker and DeMar DeRozan, and that's more money than New Orleans would be sending out, so maybe you could take back some money from them. But like, here's those three, like, you know, DeMar DeRozan comes off the books after next year, like, and we're gonna try and, you know what, we're not really rebuilding, we're actually gonna try and win. And all of a sudden we have, think about the defensive backcourt, or defensive, you know, 1 through 3,
three-headed monster.
Yeah, Murray, White, and Holiday. Like, think about that.
I'm good with that if you've got the wink deal that Holiday is going to extend or re-sign. Because if that's for a rental, then I think I'd rather have Walker and what is it, 11?
Right.
I think, I mean, that's and really, like, I think that's a factor in all of these, and I think it's unrealistic to think that you know, Holiday, if it gets down to, you know, these things getting kind of real, like, he's of course going to have conversations with these teams and like give them an indication, or his representation will give an indication of if he's going to stick around or not.
100%.
And so like, you know, that we should probably throw that in there just to sort of, you know, clarify the conversation a little bit. But yeah, if I got assurances he's going to stay, then I think I'm probably good with that. In San Antonio.
Are you doing that if you're New Orleans? Because I think you know, you could probably rework it. Like, they could have LaMarcus Aldridge instead of DeRozan, who you could argue would actually work there.
Yeah.
But it's so short term, and the Spurs are like, they just have like too many. I don't want to say they have too many wings, but like, does DeMar DeRozan has to become basically your sixth man in that scenario? And that's just so many guys with, like, I would say non-elite jumpers, like Murray, even White, and then DeRozan. And Holiday is like, I'll call him an average shooter. So I think DeRozan has to be involved in there. And look, maybe DeRozan to the Lakers is a real thing. So you could, like, that, if that has legs, you could manipulate that to be a 3-team deal. But why, if you're the Pelicans, would you want to help out the Lakers? Maybe it's subterfuge where you're actually you think DeRozan's gonna hurt them, so you are gonna facilitate
saboteur. No, I think the Spurs backcourt / wing situation is kind of like how we used to think the Magic had a front court logjam, and then suddenly, like, they just don't have anybody that's good up there that they want to keep anymore. So, like, that's going to solve itself. But if I'm the Pelicans and you give me the choice of DeRozan and Aldridge, I'm taking Aldridge all day because of the fit and what he kind of allows you to maybe get away with Zion Williamson in the front court defensively and spacing-wise. Mostly spacing-wise. Aldridge isn't a great defender anymore. Not that he ever was. But yeah, that's, if you're the Spurs, but conversely, you got to get off DeRozan because, like, he's like, what are you going to use him for otherwise?
Right. And I guess the other permutation would be, like, you do have Rudy Gay and Patty Mills. And so, like, you know, Gay plus Lonnie Walker, plus if you're moving pick number 11 as an actual salary, I think that's almost $4 million around. So, like, that might actually get you there. That was quick math for me. But then you're still left with DeRozan on the roster. And so, like, I feel like Jrue Holiday, I would still like him there, but it becomes like this weird fit all of a sudden. So, and no, it doesn't quite get you there. There'd have to be more salary involved, it looks like. Yeah. So, because Jrue is making 27 next year. Oh no, it is enough to get you there. So Rudy Gay,
good job.
On the fly. I'll ask you about that really quick. What do you think about the rumor that the Lakers have shown interest in DeMar? Let's twofold this. The Warriors might like Aldridge, and the Lakers might like DeMar DeRozan. Which of those, I feel like, very odd, if questionable, if poor fits, do you actually like the best? And look, we'll reemphasize that this is the time of year where all these leaks are just going to pour out. So if they've even shown, like, interest on the peripherals or however loose it is, like, this stuff is leaking out. So there are agendas, but those were 2 reports, and they're just ones that don't necessarily make a ton of sense to me.
So the DeRozan thing, I'm not a big DeRozan fan. I don't know. So I'm gonna flip around and say I think DeRozan makes more sense on the Lakers than Aldridge on the Warriors, and a lot of that has to do with the things you would give up from the Lakers to get DeRozan sort of don't matter that much. It's the Green, Kuzma, whatever package, and filler, I guess. But for what are you giving up if you're the Warriors to get Aldridge? Is this Wiggins going to the Spurs? Is it like how are we doing this? Is because the TPE is not useful because it's not even close to Aldridge's salary. So that's my question. Like,
I think the rumored deal has been DeRozan and number 11 for Wiggins. Aldridge and number 11 for Wiggins and number 2.
I'm not doing that.
I'm not doing it either. Like, the Warriors are already light on wings, and this makes it look. Andrew Wiggins, that contract is not good, but this makes you even lighter on wings.
Well, right, and I mean maybe you're going to get again. Let's talk about Patrick Williams again, or Devin Vassell, or one of those. Okoro is probably not going to slip that far, but if he did, I would be very interested for the Warriors. You maybe get your wing back that way, but I guess Aldridge spreads the floor, which lets you get away with Draymond Green, and together with him up front. But again, Wiggins is unfortunately and alarmingly very important to the Warriors, and that number 2 pick is very important to them too. So
I'm so sorry. He's alarmingly important. Sorry,
he is though. Like you said it. I mean, it's like who's guarding? I mean, Klay Thompson can't guard everybody. Maybe he can't guard anybody anymore. I don't know after the ACL. So yeah, Wiggins matters, and Aldridge. In theory, it makes sense with some of the spacing and stuff, but I'm not willing to give up that package if that's what it takes for the Warriors.
I'm with you, and also I respect the Lakers' never-ending quest to surround LeBron with fewer shooters, but I actually don't hate the fit if you're rigidly staggering minutes because the half-court offense was absolute junk when LeBron was off the floor last year. I think it was in the 30th percentile, and they were outscoring opponents, but they did that basically on the back of their defense, and they had some Rondo, no LeBron lineups that were really good on offense. If you're replacing the Rondo minutes with DeMar DeRozan, I would argue that's an upgrade. Maybe not in the playoffs defensively. Rondo's going to do more stuff there, but and yes, Rondo's a better passer, but DeRozan has been a very high-end pick and roll player for basically a half decade now.
Yep.
And if he's running things, and look, you can do. I think what helps you have or be allowed to have some non-shooters around LeBron is you could do more stuff with him than you can a traditional wing or another guard. What LeBron is the screener is not a terrible idea. Yeah, people can just go under DeRozan, but he's just so good at manipulating defenders in the half court with his change of pace that you could run pick and rolls all day with the two of them, or you could have LeBron spot up and do it with Anthony Davis, where I think it's good enough. My one qualm would be if you're closing games, are you at a point where you could say, listen, DeRozan, you're making 27-7, but you're going to be on the bench for those minutes? Or you're at least committed to be right, we're not going to play. Anthony Davis is going to play center now. Because if DeRozan is starting with LeBron and Anthony Davis, can you afford to have, I would say, a fourth below average shooter? Or because LeBron's right around average, I would say. He waxes and wanes every season. So that would be my concern, but I actually don't hate it.
No, I don't hate. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. The question is, are you willing to take on a theoretically high-end, significant player that you might not have on the floor at the end of the games that matter? And the Lakers, I intend to play more games that matter than, as many games that matter as anybody. So that's a tough look if DeRozan is on the bench. Davis at center does alleviate some of that. But boy, you're on. It's not a 4-on-5 thing because DeRozan can do so much with the ball, and that sort of gets you around the. It's not like you're going to station him in the corner where teams can ignore him. You have to involve him in stuff. But then you're kind of marginal. So is your answer to keeping DeRozan on the floor at the end of finals games? Well, he has the ball now instead of LeBron or AD. LeBron opens up more than almost anybody else, but I don't know if that's a tough way to go. But again, he does solve their second unit stuff. The problem is he's certainly not paid like a second unit player. And I very much doubt he'd be willing to accept a second unit role. And it doesn't make a lot of sense financially to pay someone what you would be paying him as essentially a backup, playmaker or point guard, quotes around the point guard part.
And you are giving up equity if Avery Bradley opts out. So he's then you could assume that maybe he's gone. Now you've given up Danny Green, who people get frustrated with, but he's just very plug and play at both ends of the floor. And look, Kuzma, like he's a better defender. The past 2 seasons, he's been average, and he was close to he played a lot of above average defense, I will say, towards later in the year this season. And yes, he's coming up on an extension, and he's not young in the sense. Look, here I am, age 31, saying a 26-year-old isn't necessarily young, but like you are giving up something to get DeRozan to me. Like, yes, it's easy to make that deal. But like, are the Spurs giving you anything else in return too? So I don't know. I wouldn't make the deal, but if you told me one of those two was going to happen, I think the one that has the best chance of working out is by far DeRozan to LA.
Agree. Strongly agree.
Aaron Gordon been in, I think, the trade rumor mill since like he entered the league, basically. The Magic are dangling Aaron Gordon at number 15 reportedly with the goal of moving up in the draft. Do you see any like fits for him there? And the one thing I'll just preface this with, it really feels like Aaron Gordon's trade value is all over the place, where some people kind of view his deal as an asset just because like he can do a lot of things across different positions on defense. He did better passing in the half court this year. And look, 18-1 next year, then drops to 16-4 the year after. But then there are just people like, well, that's just an overpay for someone who should really only be a play finisher on offense, has been asked to do more, tried to do more, can't do much more. So where do you fall on him? And is there any team that you could see like being interested in Aaron Gordon at number 15 as a package as a means of moving down, I guess you would call it?
I swear to God, you're reading my notes, because my first comment on Aaron Gordon is like a rhetorical question, which is, what percentage of his career has he not been rumored / dangled / discussed in trades? Is it more than 10%? And it's like, that feels about right. Like, he's just always been there. And the second thing I have is, he seems to be someone that everyone agrees will fit almost anywhere, provided you can get him to play the way that you want him to, which is what you described. You be a defender, rebound, run, score in transition, finish. Don't dribble so much, and we don't need you to be a knockdown shooter. And then at the same time, everyone agrees he's not a needle mover. So it's like the Aaron Gordon paradox. We have been doing the same job for too long, I think. But so the best, quote unquote, best thing I could come up with, if you're the Magic and you're moving up, this draft is the worst draft for this, because I don't see a lot of value or a team that would be interested or motivated to do it. Like, honestly, in the top 10, I hope you have one. So what I was thinking is, you got the Kings at 12, and so maybe if the Magic, this is going to be one of those, like, we're on the phone when the 11th pick is coming in, right, with the Kings, and there's a guy at 12. He's not making it to 15. You have to have him. Let's say it's Patrick Williams, just because it's the Patrick Williams podcast. It won't be. He'll be gone probably. But it's whoever it is. You say Gordon and 15 for like Harrison Barnes and 12, or you have to throw in more money or something like that. But if you just have to have 12, or whoever's at 12, maybe that makes sense, because I kind of like Gordon for the Kings as like a low usage defender finisher. I think he's better than Harrison Barnes at almost everything that you would care about from that position. But like, that's such a marginal move up that I don't know if that's worth it, or either party would do it. Tell me you have something higher up in the draft that makes sense.
I have a bunch of ones, actually. So
okay, I will tell you if they're good or not.
Yeah, so Phoenix sitting at number 10. Kelly Oubre Jr. and number 10 for Aaron Gordon and number 15.
Why is how much better is Aaron Gordon than Kelly Oubre?
On defense, noticeably.
Yeah.
And needs the ball less on offense, in theory. And also, I think he fills 2 positions for you, where you start him at the 4 next to Ayton. And look, Aaron Gordon shot 36.1% on catch and shoot threes after January 1st this year. I actually think he was terrible after the All-Star break, though, which I feel like happens every year. It's like post-January 1st, his split is great, but it actually kind of cratered towards the very end of the season. Anyway, though, and then he could play backup 5 for you. And then he doesn't need the ball, again, in theory, as much on offense. Like, you're not going to use Kelly Oubre Jr. as a screener or just Kelly Oubre Jr. is a play finisher, but he's just not in the way of like a combo big like Aaron Gordon can be used. And then I mentioned this before, like maybe the guy that you want at number 10, because let's say Patrick Williams and Devin Vassell are off the board. And so you want Sadiq Bey. He might still be there at number 15. For all I know, at this point, Patrick Williams could be there at number 15. I don't expect him to.
Not if we're drafting.
Right. He should not fall past New York at number 8 is my stance. I apologize to his career in advance, but
yeah.
So anyway, but that would be my justification for it. And like if like that's not enough for, I go back and forth because I'm like, Oubre's not going to be a long-term piece for Orlando. Like they would have to really want the guy who's at number 10 to give up anything else in this deal. Like you're not going to give up Mo Bamba, nor does Phoenix need him. You're not, I don't know why Phoenix would want Farouk Aminu. You're not going to give up Fultz, and then the money just starts to get messy. I don't think you're going to give up Chuma Okeke. Like I don't think that's going to be a thing. So I think that would have to be the deal. But the fact that you're like lackluster about it makes me think that maybe it's a good deal. Like you're kind of meh.
Yeah, that's a good sign. I mean, it just would depend on, again, do you have to have this guy at 10 if you're Orlando? And then if the answer is yes, then I guess the difference in those in Gordon and Oubre is worth it. Because you think of Oubre as a short timer, which he is because of his contract status, but Gordon's not going to. Gordon's deal is fine. You can move it on if you need to, if you're Phoenix, or you can start thinking about extensions, and it's not going forever, and I think it's declining too. Maybe I have that wrong.
You are correct with Gordon. Yeah, he goes from 18-1 to 16-4.
Yeah, super manageable. So that's fine. I know. You're better at this than I am, so I shouldn't be surprised that that's much better than my bullshit Kings trade.
The other one I had, this would have to take place. You agree to it, like wink, wink, and then you move these picks as actual salary, basically. But you would go Patty Mills and number 11 for Aaron Gordon and number 15.
So let's see. I don't know how much I like Pat. I love Patty Mills, even though he's getting older. I guess he makes sense. I don't know how much sense he makes for Orlando, but it's all about the pick, right? Well,
it's also like they need DJ Augustine could leave in free agency. They need a guard who can shoot, and like if you play Patty Mills next to Markelle Fultz, like that just works.
I guess if you think that Mills can still guard ones and twos, which I guess that's probably reasonable to say. Yeah, no, that's okay with me. It feels a little, because Fultz is big enough that he could get you to. That's fine. I think it just kind of throws me because Mills is so much further on in his career, and it seems like Orlando should be skewing younger. But I guess that's why you're getting the 11th pick, so that's pretty good too.
And right, but you're also like, in most of these deals, like unless you're trading really high up, I don't know if you're making this deal with necessarily the thought of a rebuild. Like if you're giving up Aaron Gordon, you're not looking to get just back a pick. But I am about to try and move higher up the draft board, so okay, buckle up.
Let's hear it.
All right, so you're Minnesota. You have number 1. It does seem like they're in love with LaMelo Ball, but LaMelo Ball would also make a ton of sense for Orlando if they're looking to take the really big long-term swing. You have Aaron Gordon, you have number 15, and there's Chuma Okeke, and then I would say that would be the deal, or maybe you replace the latter with a future pick. Does that interest you at all if you're Minnesota, or is it at this point, no, I'd rather have LaMelo Ball?
I'd rather have number 1. I mean, even if I'm not taking Ball, I'm going to use it. I think I can do better with that pick than Gordon 15. And like if I don't know what else, you definitely have to give me an additional future first and probably not protect it for me to give up number 1 overall, even in a bad draft. And even if they have no intention of taking them, it's just I have to believe number 1's worth more than that.
Okay, so how about number 2? You're the Warriors, Aaron Gordon, and you can essentially take your pick here. I'm not saying Orlando would let you, but like there are so many different permutations. You have Aaron Gordon, number 15, and then you can go Terrence Ross, you can go Evan Fournier if he opts in, you can go Markelle Fultz even. So Aaron Gordon, number 15, and one of those other 3 players for Andrew Wiggins and number 2.
See, I think if the Warriors want Gordon, I think they do the step up trade, do the TPE to Minnesota or whatever for James Johnson or some other expiring, and that's how you go get Gordon.
But what are you giving up in that deal for Gordon?
You got to give up a future pick or something, not Minnesota's. To me, like it's not that different than number 1, and really like in a lot of ways the Warriors. This is hard to articulate, but this number 2 pick, I think, should have more value to the Warriors than number 1 does to the Wolves, just because of how urgently the Warriors need someone to sort of give them, if the Wolves botch this, they still have Towns, right? And like, so they got that bridge or that guy who's their franchise. The Warriors, I think I think they should use the pick. I think they should use it on James Wiseman. I feel extremely uneasy saying that. I just think that in the faintest of scenarios, call it like a 10%, 20% chance Wiseman becomes a really, really good two-way big guy. So if I'm Golden State, I still need more. I think, and I don't, and this is a little different than the Wolves, because I don't know how much better the offers will be for number 2 out there. But I just think it matters so much to the Warriors to get a superstar or someone with superstar potential with this pick and Gordon is basically the opposite of that. He's just such a steady thing. And 15, you assume you're not getting anybody like that at 15. So I don't know. It's not quite enough for me.
Here's my final one. So you have the Wizards sitting at number 9. So you go number 9, and you're trading number 9 as an actual salary, and then it's a poo-poo platter basically of other salaries, where Ish Smith could help if DJ Augustine leaves in Orlando, Jerome Robinson, and Troy Brown Jr. for Aaron Gordon at number 15.
So you're making the selection at 9 for whoever Orlando wants, and then you're sending him on as part of the deal?
Yeah.
Okay. That's another one that's pretty good. I think I think I might like that one the best.
I think I might like it less for the Magic. I think you can talk yourself into, hey, Troy Brown and Ish Smith, even though Ish Smith's not expiring, you're like, those are interesting for the Magic, and maybe they're inclined to give Jerome Robinson more run, like the Wizards did toward the end of last year. Look, I will say technically Robinson and Troy Brown are like recent first-round picks, and so you could talk yourself into that way, but there is an element of like, this does feel like a poo-poo platter.
I like Brown actually a fair amount, but I think that would, to me, that's like, so if the Wizards are there at 9 and Okongwu is on the board still, it just makes way too much sense for them to just take him and keep him. But if he's gone, then I'm not sure, assuming they're going to go for a center, which is just my assumption. Then yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense for the Wizards. But yeah, it's a tough sell when it's like it's Brown and Robinson were very recently first rounders and therefore have the value that you would assign to a first rounder taken in that slot, when we actually know kind of, especially Robinson, like what he is now.
Right. Look, I know you have to go put a child to bed. I appreciate you giving me so much of your time, over an hour once more. This was fun. I'm going to be pestering you probably incredibly soon. For anyone who's not following Grant on Twitter, at GT_Hughes. The next time we talk, I believe, I don't know if things will have settled down, but like we will have passed we'll talk before then, but when you're actually on the podcast, I believe we'll have passed the transaction tumult.
Whew. I think we're gonna have to collect ourselves after that, because it's gonna be nuts, which is a good thing.
But thank you once again for coming on, and I will talk to you soon. It's always a pleasure, Grant.
Thanks, Dan.